Welcome back to Les Schwab Tire Center's Outdoor GPS, presented by Fisherman's Marine and Outdoor. Now it's time for your weekend tech tip, brought to you by Chevy Silverado.
Welcome back, everyone. We're joined by Chris Bertopoulos here in the studio. We're talking about winter steelhead, and there's no question that in the last handful of years, I guess probably even more than that now, bead fishing has become extremely popular. I will admit that 80% of the time that I'm targeting steelhead in any one of 3 rivers that I spend my time on, I've got a bead going in some way, shape, or form. I only run a single bait. I don't do double rigs for a number of reasons. And beads, bead life, man. I mean, it's just hard to argue with them. You don't have to mess with bait. As long as you rig them the right way where they're not sliding up and down your leaders and just being a nuisance to you. Different sizes, different clarities, different colors, soft beads, hard beads. There's just ways that you can really present them to just be effective, right? And I think that turns a lot of us lazy. We get stuck on one particular bait. Like my bag that I've got here, I don't even know. I've got 5 or 6 of these Ziploc bags with either yarnies in it, which is my number 2. You mentioned those a little bit earlier, with a little gob of eggs or just some Procure scent on them. But your take on beads, yes, you know, let's show those too. It's a profile, right? It's not necessarily what it's made out of. It's how it's presented and its size, what it looks like. These are just a little bit different, little puffball things that you doctored up again. Dr. Chris. I think I'm going to re-nickname him, Dr. Chris. But these little things here, again, it just makes your life easy. For bank anglers, like myself, I carry 2 rods with me in the rig. Now, most of the time when I head down to the river, when I put my waders on, I usually just take 1 rod with me because I don't like carrying a bunch of rods around. So I'm starting out with beads. I'm starting out or switching that up with a yarny. I might even go to a worm, a little bit different look at it than the way he's got it rigged, although I might change that a little bit. That's just a sexy way to run that worm. But I think we get stuck on that. So for folks that do that, like myself, that kind of get stuck on, you know, one way of targeting, maybe it's bobber and jig, you know, what advice would you tell someone, or what reasoning would you give someone to say, listen, you know, don't get stuck on one thing, kind of look at different options?
Well, I think we get caught up in using things that we catch fish on. So if you've caught a fish on something, you're prone to use it again, and again, and again, and again, and you have that confidence. And so it's hard to ignore that. I get it. But you gotta, to be an innovative angler and to be a successful angler, you have to try new things that are hard for you, that oftentimes you'll think of as, wow, I would never have done that. You know, but you see other people catching fish on it, and it just like, and then you see them catching fish on it time and time again, and it just makes you think that, hey, I gotta conform. I gotta try this. I remember when I looked at 360 flashers, and I'm like, no way.
That's a great point. I mean, that is a great point.
But look at us now. You can't not be fishing.
You weren't alone. I mean, there was a lot of top guides that were like, no. And now they're just like everybody else for running 360s. And it's to your point. You know, you got to be willing to be flexible.
Just don't not try new things. If you see people catching fish on something, you know, register that in your brain and take note and consider trying it. And I remember when the whole worm thing came out 20 years ago, and I thought, wow, no, plastic worms.
More than that now.
Oh, man.
A lot longer
maybe longer than that, especially if you include BC.
Correct.
But, yeah, I mean, many of these techniques that I'm using now, the more newer techniques, I thought wouldn't work. I thought it was silly, and but look at us now.
Yeah, well, you kind of hit it on the head. We were talking in the break about these size 20 beads, right? Literally dared to use them a couple of years ago. If it wasn't for these particular size of beads a couple of years ago, and even last year in some of the conditions that they're really more useful, a little bit higher, a little bit faster, more off color, which is the theory. But I had great success in low, clear water conditions for steelhead with a size 20 bead. Now, the first time I actually it was my buddy Fish Killer Freddy. I know he doesn't watch the show, but he turned us on to using those no matter what the situation was, because the fish just keyed in on that size of that profile of the bead.
Well, they can see it.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to, they know what a perfectly round presentation is. They're attracted to an orb or a perfectly round circular lure or bait for some reason. I think and then size may be less of a concern to them. But they like rounds. I know that.
Yeah.
Well, think about it. When they're a young salmon that emerges from or steelhead that emerges from the gravel, you know, they know that salmon eggs, which are flowing freely through, is super protein to them. If they want to survive, they got to look for and they got to hunt down and they got to find loose eggs.
Sure.
So they know what that round, orangey, pinkish, reddish profile is, and they're obviously attracted to it. And even in larger sizes sometimes. Maybe they don't have a very good sense of size.
You know, who knows? I'm not a fish. I'd like to think
really ask them.
No, you really can't. But I think you hit the nail on the head, though. They see them when they're young, and they get to the salt water. They never see it again. They come back to the fresh water, and they're like, oh, I know what that is, and they go after it. Another one, though, we can't overlook, bobber and jig. Okay. I was never too old when this first kind of came out to go, well, that's not going to work. It was one of those situations where it was, seriously? A crappie jig? Come on now. And it became extremely popular. It's one of my favorite ways to go after them. Admittingly, I don't use it enough, right? There's so many situations targeting winter steelhead in particular. So many situations where a bobber and jig is probably going to be more effective than a bobber and bead, bobber dog and a bead. It just depends on what you want to throw, and it falls right back down to what you say. You're confident with one thing, you're going to stick with it, but there's a reason why in a drift boat you typically see 2, 3, 4 rods per person, all rigged up a different way. So you can't overlook the bobber and jig setup. A number of different ways to do it. Mine's just a very standard slider setup with an 1/8 ounce jig. But
it's a nightmare.
But it is a nightmare jig. You know, Dave kind of behind all that from the beginning, from Hawken. I will admit I don't fish a lot of that, and I don't know why. Because I know guys that just absolutely tattoo them, but that's all they fish. Again, it falls down to them being very confident in that one bait, and that's what they fish with.
And the water type that they fish too.
Correct, which is
low, clear water generally. Absolutely. The bobber and jig method.
And you can be a little bit more precise with where you want to put them, depending on where those fish might be. Now, when we come back from this break, if we don't talk about bobber dogging, we'd be really not doing you a favor. There's a reason why bobber dogging has become extremely popular. It's one of the most effective ways for salmon. Sure, but for steelhead, which is where it all started, bobber dogging, how Chris likes to do that. He's got an interesting float setup, a little bit different setup than some, and definitely different than mine. So we'll take a little bit of a look at how he likes to do it. We'll take a look how I like to do it, and then you'll probably find somewhere in the middle, or either one of these, that'll work for you as well.